Hello and welcome to the I Do Wedding Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Nina Adio, a social media marketing expert specific to the wedding industry. On this show, I discuss tips to help you DIY your social media, as well as getting the confidence and income to outsource it. Thank you for allowing this episode to come through on your Bluetooth, your car radio, wherever it may be you're listening from today. Now, let's take your wedding business to the next level. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the I Do Wedding Marketing Podcast. I have a fun interview for you. I know it's going to be fun for you because it was fun for me, and it is a long one, so I want to be respectful of your time and get moving. I am recording this intro on April 11th, and I do want to let you know that I have 3 spots left for the month of April to do strategy calls. So, if you want to learn more about doing strategy calls with me at I Do Wedding Marketing, you can head on over to my website or send me a message on Instagram. My username is I Do Wedding Marketing. But let's get into the awesome interview I had with Jordan Kentris from A Good Day. And Jordan is talking with us today about embracing criticism as a wedding pro. And this is just such an important topic. I really don't think that we could talk about it enough, which is why that was what I wanted to discuss with him. So let me tell you a little bit about Jordan. A user experience designer by trade, Jordan's background in art and design isn't just professional, it's been a deep seated passion for him. And I learned that when we initially got on our Zoom before we started recording. Jordan showed me, he took me on a little tour of his space to see all of these really awesome alternate movie posters he had. And what I mean by alternate is they are not the officially licensed or released movie poster. It's either something interpreted by an artist or maybe that wasn't used for the film. It was really just so exciting and incredible to look through. And it made so much of his passion that he was talking about within his brand. He's the owner and founder of A Good Day, which is a boutique design firm that creates one of a kind stationery. It made it make so much sense because here he was surrounded by this unique art just in his own space. And that's what he does for each and every event. Each event really is their own unique brand. He's also a user experience or UX designer. So I ask about that in the episode as well. And Jordan regularly works with creatives on digital products to make sure they are capturing their brand's essence. And as you start to become the person behind your brand, you begin to understand how criticism, difficult clients, reviews, whatever it may be, becomes kind of an unwanted part of it. But Jordan really helps us shift the mindset into embracing that and how to use it. So I think you guys are really going to get a lot from this episode. All of Jordan's links so that you'll be able to follow him are going to be down below. And he also mentioned he's going to be at Wedding MBA this year. So if you're going to be going there, make sure you follow along to see when and where Jordan will be speaking and presenting. But for now, he's speaking here on the I Do Wedding Marketing Podcast, embracing criticism as a wedding pro. Jordan, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Nina.
Yeah, they can't see, but you have this beautiful pattern backdrop
Oh yeah,
behind you. Or wall, is it
it's
wallpaper?
wallpaper.
Yes.
I've been again. I was chatting with Nina before. We moved into a new house in May last year, and I was finally able to put wallpaper up in my house. So I've got 4 rooms that are wallpapered with signature walls, but they're
Hmm.
all different. I'm a really big pattern person, so it's like I love having it, and it's behind me. So every time I get on a call, it's a talking piece.
It is, and it works well with the pattern you're
Yeah,
wearing. It's just so on brand for you.
I
And
try. It was like it worked well. Come on.
yes, yes. I'm happy you have a house and you can finally let that out. I've been putting the Dollar Tree like fake tiles on in my kitchen so this way won't get in trouble in the apartment. But for photos, it works. So
Oh
that's
yeah.
my pro tip for any listeners today. Now, today we're talking about a pretty I think, important topic, embracing criticism as a wedding pro. And I think criticism can kind of probably have a lot of layers, whether it's criticism that's done directly, done live at the event, criticism in the form of review. What is the most, prominent form of criticism do you feel that you speak to and that people are dealing with?
Oftentimes I find criticism, kind of your point from a client perspective, can really come back in ways that are kind of unexpected. The piece that I find that we tend to get really affected by oftentimes is really early on in the process. So you don't necessarily know your clients,
Hmm.
or when you're working with a vendor partner and an offhand comment is made. And that's the stuff that I find people take. I mean, reviews suck. Like when it is out there, I get it. But you can like the one thing I do like about reviews is you can respond back and you can at least come back at it in a when you compose yourself and come back at it and present it in a way. Like I know people who've got negative review, but have actually garnered business from a negative review in how they've responded
Yes,
to that review
yes.
in writing, because you handle it professionally. You let them know what the situation was and you didn't come off like you were, attacking each other and blame. But when someone says, you're not doing that the way I expected, that wasn't to what I wanted, like
Mhm.
that kind of stuff is like, especially as a creative, you can take a lot really personally. And I think it's important to find ways of digesting that and accepting it in a way. I'm like, obviously, it sucks getting any kind of feedback. So, one thing I like to do is actually take criticism and mentally flip the conversation in my head to getting feedback, because at least feedback I can, it's reciprocal and it's not I'm going to go back and say something negative about them, but I can have a conversation. Whereas at least with criticism feels like super negative
Yeah.
in your mind when you hear the word. And so for me, it's important to be able to flip that conversation to something that's a little bit more digestible, and also just how you can then react to it and ingest it and learn from it and move on from it.
Yeah, one example I'm thinking of when you mentioned how it can happen early on in the process. I think most people can deal with this is or can relate to this. Sometimes we're thinking of it before they even have the chance, and it's with pricing. And somebody coming back going, "Oh gee, that's a lot." Or so and so gave this. What advice do you have for people to A, own their price, send it, feel good, and B, to respond and embrace that the client has, initiated that conversation regarding pricing?
Yeah, it's really, I think it's really important to kind of disassociate to part of that feedback. And it's not to say again you don't care about it. I think it's important to care about it. But when it comes to pricing, your price is your price for a reason. You have a cost of living. You have, you want to you want to travel. You want to do any of this. You want to eat dinner. Like you got
Yes,
to pay
yes,
your
yeah, you
rent.
want to eat.
Could be a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And the reason you've done it that way is so that you can sustain your life and you can sustain your business and have a long, healthy career. Like you don't want to burn yourself out because you're constantly discounting your service or
Mhm.
trying to compete based on price. Because to me, competing on prices is a loss leader for everyone, because
Yes.
everyone is going to be continually, marking themselves down further and further and further, because someone will always undercut you.
Yeah.
The ant is going to do it for free. Like, okay, well then you
Yes, yeah.
don't. Like, oops. So doing that is a sacrifice to your business values, first off. But B, the response I have is, well, my cost is this. For me, as a really high-end stationer, when I work on that side, and they're like, oh my God, that's so expensive. I was like, yeah, this is going to take me 150 hours to produce this. Do you want to make $1 an hour?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't go it that way, but like think about that. Like as soon as you give a value of time to something, it becomes a lot easier to break that down, because you're like, you're expecting me to work below minimum wage.
Hmm.
Like you don't go to Starbucks and say, well, I'm gonna only give you 50 cents for this $8 drink because that's what I want to pay. You're like, no, that's how much it costs. Like, add whipped cream, please, 50 cents. Like there's no conversation there, but they feel like there's a barter situation. And sometimes there may be, but oftentimes I don't see value in that. And so the conversation for me is, well, this is what the level of effort that comes into that price and why our pricing is different and what it means that you'll get from us that you might not be getting from someone else. I don't, I'm not going to go and undercut someone or say something negative about someone, but for me, I do a lot of stuff by hand. It's all hand finished. You're going to get a custom box at the end. You're going to get these things. And I'm like, okay, well, if they start to do the math, they're going to be like, okay. And if they're not my person, they're not my person. They're going to move on. And then I'm like, okay, at least I feel confident that I've laid that ground rule.
Yes, yes. And it still could be that they may end up being your person because a lot of brides, grooms, people planning weddings are really told to negotiate or to question. And it could be that they're just giving it a try. And then when
Yeah.
you come back confident, and maybe don't try, it's so hard, right? I'm saying don't take it as a criticism, but I panic. I do the same thing when somebody bring something up like that because it's almost becomes this self-worth check. But your self-worth, I think, should hopefully always check out and overcome it. What would you say, Jordan?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's really hard with clients. You can there's an element of, well, oftentimes it's their first event. They've never done any of this before, so there's a lot of learning, and
Yeah.
you can usually chalk up some of that stuff to that learning. Other than like maybe a parent who is
Yeah.
highly critical, just because they feel they need to be,
Right.
like
Then just say imagine being their child. I'm so
yeah,
glad I'm just a vendor.
yeah. So like some of that stuff is hard, especially when they're like, well, you didn't do it that well. And you're like, but I did amazing based in the circumstances.
Mhm.
And so sometimes you're just like, well, that person is grumpy or a jerk, or that's just that. And thankfully they're not my client. And my client is over here. And I'm servicing my client and they appear to be happy.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I kind of go in. The hardest part for me is vendor to vendor criticism. So, if
Mm.
you've dropped the ball, because there's a level of respect and reputation that comes to it. If you mess up on if you don't do your best for a client, that's one thing, and you can always rectify that. But that doesn't always have the same kind of spillover effect as, as a planner. Let's say you're working with a photographer and they're not doing their best. You might not refer that photographer to anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that kind of level of relationship could be super impacted. And so, how do you have those conversations and how do you take those things and own that conversation? I think is really important because oftentimes we don't want to accept it. Like sometimes you're like blatantly like, oh, yeah, I really screwed that up. But other times you're like, that was okay. But in
Mhm.
reality, it was like, I didn't really do my best, or I was super distracted, or something happened, but I never gave you any context as to what happened. And so now you think this is my level of service, and it's not. And so for me, it's about opening up a channel of like honesty and openness and not being afraid. Like they may never work with you again, but at least you've let it be known why. And you can work to build that relationship up again. But oftentimes it is hard. And I get it. You're like, at that point, you're like super vulnerable and you're like, oh, this is
Yes.
icky. But I think it's really important and shows a lot of character when you can be like, listen, I did mess up. And that's not my normal way of being. My level of service is like this, and I pride myself in being this way. But I should have let you know X happened a
Yes.
lot earlier so that we could then make a decision together collectively and then come up with a plan so that you're not in a situation that maybe put you in an awkward spot with your client or put you in an awkward spot with another vendor or you lost money, like any of those kinds of things. Like it's just about owning that and figuring out mutually how to come to an even keel.
Yeah, yeah, because the reality is mistakes do happen. And if they're gonna happen, I would much rather be with someone who's gonna own it and problem solve it than someone who's gonna either, just kind of block you and move on or
Yeah, yeah, well,
haven't
that's
had
not
it.
my problem, and you're like,
Yeah,
it is your
yeah,
problem.
it's almost I feel like this is like I'm taking you back to driver's ed, but they say when you get in an accident, you never want to admit fault. You never want to say sorry.
Right.
And this is not that situation. I find even when I was in the workforce that understanding and owning and saying, like you said, that's not the level of service I pride myself upon. I'd love to have another opportunity. And sometimes that's all it takes, just hearing it out and owning it.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it's also important to lay out a plan of how you're going to rectify it if there
mhm.
is opportunity to
Yeah.
do that. Of like, oh, this messed up. I'm going to, out of my own pocket, fix it this way. Or I'm gonna offer something else to the client as a like as a an apology gift or like
Mhm.
whatever. Like so at least you know
They
there's
do.
reparations being made in relation to whatever happened.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think it's really important on both sides to understand that.
I have a question for you. There's one review, and more so, it's the response a vendor gave that had always bothered me. And so I want to see kind of what you would have done in this situation. And it was a girl was not happy with her wedding photos. So she wrote a review saying why. And the pro was, very nasty in his response, but what he also did was he shared her entire wedding album and linked it. And some of these were personal photos of her getting ready with her grandma, like, and shared the public album so people could see for themselves. But I thought it was I didn't like that he showed the public album, because now I know if I had a bad experience with him, that's what he's going to do. He's going to take these photos I didn't like and share even the photos where I'm putting my wedding dress on that
Right.
maybe I
Yeah.
don't want posted everywhere. So I wanted to kind of get your opinion and take on that, and what maybe would be a good way, whether it's the example of a photographer or someone else, to stand by their work without maybe being so invasive.
Yeah. Photography is really interesting because it is very subjective.
Hmm.
I've seen cases where clients are like, they want a very different style of photography, but the photographer is like, I'm a light and airy photographer. And they're like,
Hmm.
but it was all light and airy. And you're like, well, that's what you hired me for.
Right, right.
Hello, needle scratch. Uh,
Or they just say, I don't like how I looked, when it's like, it's still a
um,
great photo. Everyone else
yeah,
likes how you look in it. Like,
yeah, it's hard. That becomes a self-confidence piece for that client. And for me, I would actually not respond back. I probably wouldn't have responded back the way that that person did by, by essentially exposing more of that, because I
mhm,
think what they were trying to do was justify, well, everything else looks great except those few shots. So I know I did a good job, but that doesn't really help the conversation, especially when you have no context. So in a review, you're like, I didn't like this, and then the person's like, well, everything else looks great, so I don't know why you don't like that.
mhm,
That doesn't really help. I would have probably been a little bit more about, I come from the world of advertising, so there's like, we're gonna take this offline.
yeah.
We're gonna have this conversation outside of the specific.
Yes, yes. I love
um,
that.
I probably would have been like, hey, listen, I really loved working with you. I think we got some amazing shots, and I hope we can work on a solution together that gives you what you're looking for ultimately. Like, as long as you come off collaborative and approachable, and it looks like you're presenting a solution, ultimately the solution might never have happened because they might not have accepted your remedy. Like maybe you want to do some additional shots after, or you're willing to do something else there, or you're like, maybe I can go back and re-edit some photos that you're not
Mhm.
super comfortable with. Can I do some additional crops that might not be a full of the dress because you don't like how you look in the dress, but I can't change that. That's how you looked in the, like, I can't be like, well, you
Yeah.
didn't look good in the dress, so like that's not really going to solve anything. So for me, it's about addressing it without always, in that case, you don't have to address the very specific things, because as a photographer, you're capturing what you're seeing. You're not going to manufacture a whole scenario so that the client, I mean, you could, but that's hire another photographer. They have a
Yeah,
second
yeah.
shooter or a third shooter there to do the things you need to do if you're going to
Mhm.
overly curate what you're trying to do from an optics perspective as a client. And so I think it just comes down to laying the foundation of what was agreed upon and aligning to that and letting them know how you're going to try and help solve or remedy that in a way. You don't have to drudge up past conversations, or he said, she said, or they said. Like that stuff is really nasty. It
Yeah.
just doesn't speak a lot to the character of what that person does, because that means they're going to get on their heels. So if something else happens, to your point, well, what are they going to do if I piss them off, or if I'm not super
Mhm.
happy with something? Like, are they going to go and drudge me out?
Yeah, when you reply in the moment, you think you're just replying to that client, but in reality, that's now becoming your behaviors becoming part of your review. And so you want to be as, you want to give yourself the best support and light possible in those scenarios. And I think your advice also of getting the conversation offline is really important.
Well, I mean, then you can have the really like, okay, well, how did you feel? What can I do to improve that in the future? Like, some of those things are learnings you can take away to the next client. But as long as you, like in reality, especially with a negative review, people just want to be heard.
Yes, yes.
And they don't feel like, for the most part, telling you that is going to solve it. So they want to make it known to a lot of people that they aren't happy with the service. So a negative review, again, for the most part, has more to do with the client and much less to do with you as the pro, than it does with your service. Because oftentimes your service is the same level that everyone else received. They just were not. It didn't meet their expectations, and for me, that's the biggest downfall. What were your expectations? Did we not agree
Yeah.
on that? Like,
And maybe that becomes a website even content
yes,
issue of expectation management,
yes,
and things like that. In relation to, we see reviews on the Knot and on Google, but also Facebook groups have become really popular,
yes,
and sometimes they can become especially popular for negative reviews. It almost can become witch hunty, where people who
yes.
didn't even book you are writing the negative review. What do you say to somebody who's maybe going through that or has a really negative review in a Facebook group and you can't get in and support, give your side or anything? How do you overcome that?
For me, I brush it off. I know it's
Mm.
hard. Like, honestly,
Yeah.
I get it. And it sucks, especially when you're in the throes of it and it's out of your control and you have no way of feeling like you can dig yourself out. But at the end of the day, again, that speaks volumes to those people. It has nothing to
Yes.
do with you. And finding a way to accept that it happens. Because if you think about it in your life, people are going to be talking about you, good or bad, without
Yeah.
you there. You have no idea. You can't control it. I can't be like, well, somewhere in the world someone hates me. Like, sure, okay, but again, you kind of just are like, okay,
Yeah,
that's
that's why, I'm grateful for growing up in a big Italian family. It's like I've been trained for this my
oh, I know,
entire life.
I
Every
know,
holiday is followed up with what you did wrong.
I
So
know.
it's like I'm ready.
I'm Greek
Yeah.
and a giant family, and my husband is a mix of European and Ukrainian, all those kind of things. It comes from a very much smaller family, and my family's like very chirpy,
Yep.
and it comes from a place of love for the most part, and I'm just used to it. But
Yes.
it comes to him as like he's not able to do anything right, and I'm like,
Yes,
oh,
yes,
that's
yes.
talking
It's
like,
funny. I can take it from my family, but when it comes from like my husband's side, I'm like, oh my God. Like,
I know.
know.
I know. So, but at the end of the day, again, you look at the context of what it's made in.
Hmm.
If it's in a vacuum, I get that most of your clients aren't sitting in that Facebook group. Like, what is the
Yes, yes.
like?
And it does go away, and I think
It's gonna
this,
fall down, and someone else is gonna do something stupid, and then someone else is
mhm,
gonna say something. Like,
and it only gets bigger the more attention you give to
yes,
it. If you start responding, if you start spreading hate, if you screenshot and say, get in this group and do blah, 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 it's gonna grow. And I'm sure from your experience working with big brands such as Pepsi, Honda, that must have really helped you to understand that the bigger you grow, there's negativity all the time, but you still can survive and be a reputable. It doesn't mean you're not a reputable, good
no,
brand.
not at all. It's just about again owning up to the mistake when you can, or owning up to whatever it is, and then laying a foundation of this is what the situation is, and this is how I've moved on from it, or not responding.
Yes, yes, and that's not a bad thing.
Respond. Yeah. There is no requirement for you to respond to every piece of feedback that you receive.
Yeah, because if you can't respond in a way that's going to make you look okay, don't respond. Because, like we said, those reviews, they see it. And
Yes.
you're better off just, and also, as a consumer, I can tell when the reviewer is crazy. You can tell, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's sometimes if you give more attention to it, it just you can tell they're just gonna go nuts and post it more places, and it will always die down. It really does.
Yeah, and a negative review is really hard,
Hmm.
but the awesome thing is you can go do 20 other events that are awesome right after it and get 20 great reviews and start to push that one down.
Hmm.
I don't go not go with someone because they had one bad review. I don't go with someone if they have like 80 bad reviews of
Yeah.
120. Then I'm like, okay, something's weird here. Like,
You just made me think. I have another like horror review story. This one company was getting negative reviews, a lot of them, like you said, where it's like so many, it's concerning. And so what they would do is they would reply with the person's home address so they'd remove the review.
That's
Isn't
horrible.
that the craziest thing you've so now it's like first I wasn't going to book you because you had bad reviews. Now I'm really not going to book you because
You're
you're
gonna dox me. You're
responding
gonna be
with
like,
people's addresses to get them to take it down.
yeah, no, that's not.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
That's not great. Don't recommend that.
Yeah. So on what as a result of your incredible bio I shared at the top of the show, I know that some of the audience is going to want to hear about your background as a user experience designer. And for someone who isn't familiar, I was wondering if you could explain what that is, because they're probably wondering since the beginning if they don't know.
Yeah, so in the world of advertising, as a UX designer, I am a architect of digital experiences. So typically, I'm working to lay out a site map, so how a site is structured, how a person navigates an experience, and a lot of that does translate into how we approach guest experience design in relation to stationery and gifting and dev pieces, because you really think about like wayfinding, which is signage at an event. So as a user experience designer, it's my job to understand the needs of the audience and then design an experience that meets those needs.
So would you say it relates to today's topic of criticism and embracing criticism because you're able to use that to pool into your future experiences?
Yeah, it's a big factor on the research side. And research isn't necessarily like I'm going to go off and do a bunch of things. It's research can be a conversation. Like right now, Nina and I are conducting research. And when you're kind of working with a client and you're doing like onboarding or offboarding or any of those things, that can be considered research into future work and future processes and improvements you can make in your business, or potential new product revenue streams, etc. And so it's really important to think about everything you're doing as an opportunity to learn and grow. And so that's where I've learned that from my side. It's like as Nina kind of mentioned, I work with some really, really big clients on their website, and we do a lot of research into what consumers like about those brands, what they don't like about those brands, what they're expecting, what are they looking for when they get to their website, what happens when they leave the website and they go do something. So I do a lot of work in automotive, and so I'd be like, I'm going to go buy a car. Okay, well, when someone's buying a car, the website is a piece of that. But what happens when they get to the dealership? What happens at the dealership? Who's talking to them? What happens when they're transacting? Like that's where my brain goes, which is such a very different
Hmm.
side of the brain, which I love. I get to be like super creative and super analytical in
Yes,
different
yeah.
parts of my business. But when you think about it, if you think about it in the context of an event, there is the host of the event, so your couple, or the family who's hosting,
Hmm.
which that is one client. But then they have clients. I'm using air quotes here, but all of their guests are
Yes.
essentially being invited into a space. And so our job as, event professionals is to give those guests and the hosts the best experience. You're creating something on behalf of those hosts. And so thinking about all those touch points along the way is super important. And that's where oftentimes things can fall down, like when
Mhm.
you're dealing with a lot of different people. But again, anytime I've dropped the ball, I've made a mistake, or something's gone on not expected, both from my end or from a client's end, I've always taken something away. Either I'm not going to
Mhm.
do that again ever again,
Yes.
my kind of person, like that maybe that kind of I should now I have more red flags.
Yes,
Uh,
now I know what I don't want in
yeah.
a client.
Or I've now introduced a new process, or I've improved a process, or I've changed a process, or I've gotten rid of a process that was actually creating extra work that was creating more problems. And so I always love to check in on every project I work on to see what's not working from my perspective. But I also love to talk to some of the pros that I have a good relationship with. It's super important. Like if you don't know someone and you don't know how they're going to be, don't necessarily open yourself up for a potential criticism situation
Mhm.
when it's not necessary. I mean, if it's your first time working with someone, you want to keep working with them, find a way to build a rapport that you can be like, hey, listen, I'd love to find out what I did really well. And is there
Yeah,
anything that
yeah.
we could work on that I could improve on in the future? Don't go, what did I do wrong? And tell me what I did wrong, because you're just going to get something that's going to upset you.
Well, speaking of that, I kind of say jokingly, the only time I run is from criticism. And I am so afraid of it. I think this is going to my background. I am so afraid of criticism and judgment because, you just show up to Thanksgiving dinner and you get it. But I then become afraid to ask for any feedback. I find myself not even asking for interviews because I'm so afraid of criticism. So how can myself or, anyone listening overcome that fear and just start to embrace that this is something you need in your business, whether it's good feedback or bad?
So definitely frame it as feedback,
Hmm.
because there's that conversation. So mentally set yourself up for, I'm going to have a conversation with this, and not necessarily like, I'm also fairly selective. Like if I knew I did a bad job on a
Yeah,
job
yeah,
or the
yeah,
client's super disappointed, I'm not going to ask them for a review. I'm
yeah,
not going
yeah.
to ask them for, because I just know it's going to be a crapshoot, and then I'm going to be it's just not going to go anywhere good. Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like I already know that's not going to be a good job, so I'm not going to do that again. Like you can
Right,
kind
and
of
you
tell.
can probably still pull that feedback
Yeah,
because it didn't go well. So
yeah.
you
You're
know
like,
what
there's
happened.
a lot of things that I was like, I got this one.
Yeah.
They're like, to open that up. Yeah, like, does this look good on me? Like you're like, if I'm asking this, that means I don't think it looks good on me. So you're
Yes.
usually asking for validation. And so I think it's really important to set things up for those conversations to be like, hey, listen, I'm working to improve how I do things. I'd love to hear a couple things that you think I did really well. Start off with the good.
Mhm.
When you in the good, your endorphins kick in and you're like, awesome, I did something well. And then I always ask for what I can improve. I don't ask, as I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, like I don't ask what went wrong,
Yeah.
because I can't fix that.
Mhm.
Like honestly, if I, in the case of mailing something got lost in the mail, that is literally out of my control. Like US
Yes.
Post, FedEx, or whatever, it's in their sphere. Like
Mhm.
the address was there, like that's it. I can't control that. But in the future, I might try and mail something out earlier. I might let the client mail it out. I might add more insurance. I might
Right, do a
add a fail safe, like
digital,
whatever, like
yeah.
whatever. We don't know.
Mhm.
But I always look to, an improvement is an area that you can take feedback on and enact it or not. Like you don't have to take every piece of advice someone gives you. Like if you always, it's always really dangerous asking for that stuff, because you can get like death of a thousand cuts, where someone tells you one thing, another person tells you another thing, another person tells you something completely contradictory, and you're like, well, who do I listen to?
Mhm.
And so it's really important to find the nuggets that you can then kind of enact on based on that improvement plan, and be like, I think it's really important to be appreciative of any form of feedback, because at least you're getting it.
Yeah.
Like the worst is, especially when you're working with like a vendor and they don't give you something and they weren't happy with your level of participation, and you don't know what you did wrong, because you're like, I thought this was
Mhm.
great, and they're like, well, that wasn't to my plan. And then you
Yeah.
have no idea, and then you're like, well, but there's something I could have done differently. But you have to ask. So I think the biggest thing is put yourself out there. I know it is hard, but you have to be kind of smart about how you put yourself out there. It's again not being like, this is a dumpster fire. Tell me more about the dumpster
Yes,
fire.
yes.
You're gonna dig yourself into a hole, and then you're going to be in self pity and stress and frustration. And you're going to likely go and do something what I consider like silly. You're going to be like, I'm going to undercut myself on another project just to get a job and do something good. I'm going to discount something, or I'm going to
Mhm.
go and over and above and try and overextend myself to try and prove that I'm worth it. Like that's where you run into more problems, because you're just setting yourself up for a cascade of failure.
Mhm.
And so it's just important to, for me, take a beat, compose yourself, and then come at it with, okay, what can I do to fix that? Do I have to reduce my workload? Do I have to take on less jobs and then maybe increase my price
Right.
to balance
Mhm.
that out if I'm going to do less of that? But that also means I have more time to dedicate to those things. Am I not going to do this thing? Am I going to outsource something that I try and keep in house? Like a lot of these things can come out of this, but it's just important to get it and then digest it. Don't react right away, regardless of whatever's happening. I always just like to thank someone for taking the time, because honestly, they don't have to give me feedback.
Yeah.
Unsolicited feedback's different, but like if I ask for
Yeah.
it, like if I am asking for it and they give it to me, that's amazing. I am super appreciative of it. I might take some time and then go back to them and say, hey, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time. We chatted whatever bit ago. I just want to let you know that I have now enacted this. I'm doing this differently. And I really appreciate it based on this.
Yes, reiterating what the feedback was and that you understand it and then the plan going forward. I love that. And that's even just great feedback for, if you're we have some people who are they're banquet managers, they're employees, gosh, the poor banquet managers.
Oh yeah.
They get the front end of everything. But and that's why, being able to repeat back the feedback and then say what you're doing going forward. And then that helps this not become a huge dumpster fire, and instead it's just a little flame that you put out.
Yeah. I mean, it is hard. Like I know it is, especially in our industry. We're very attached to our clients and
Mhm.
we want to do it like often many of us want to do the best job we can. Like I get it. And you're kind of putting yourself out there as many of us are solopreneurs too. Like
Mhm.
you're like, oh,
Yeah.
like I get it. And putting yourself out there is it's daunting and kind of scary and has an impact on your livelihood. But the really cool thing is we get to do that. Like we get to own those things, we get to have those conversations and we get to, make a mistake and then learn from it like you did as a kid. Like
Hmm.
your business is a baby in its own way. Like it's growing up and it's got its own ebbs
Yeah.
and flows and fluctuations and you're never gonna please everyone. It's just not possible. So like don't go into it being like someone said something I didn't like because it's of course sure, okay, who cares?
Mhm.
My opinion. But it's
Yeah.
taken me a long time. Like I know at the beginning of my career when I started out in advertising, I was like super precious about ideas. I was like, this is the best thing ever. And then all you get is a creative director who's like, nope. And you're like,
Right, right. Learning how to even, yeah, pitching ideas is hard. Anything where you're putting yourself out there, not getting likes on an Instagram post is hard.
oh
It's,
no.
you get it in all these different ways. But as a social media manager, when I don't get likes on a post, that's the criticism that makes me go, why didn't this post work? And in relation to that, the last question I want to ask before I get to kind of my bonus round is, what is the best form of criticism you have ever gotten or received that maybe led to something or
Yeah, I mean, so I had a project last year. I loved the outcome of the project, but it was really bumpy in the middle. There was a lot of family stuff going on, and I wasn't able to be as attentive, and the client didn't feel as nurtured as all of my other clients have ever. Like it was a level of service that I wasn't able to deliver to my caliber, and the client felt that. And I didn't ask them for a review. Learned a lot from that job. So I ended up bringing on a virtual assistant after that project because for me, I was like, okay, I know I'm not able to do this part of administration when I'm this far in the weeds on other things. And so I now have someone who helps me on that side that I've now been able to delegate things off of my plate. My clients are getting a response a lot faster than it is just me dealing with everything,
Mhm.
all the coordination. But it's led to a lot more improvements in my workflow overall. So that one thing was like, ooh, okay. I had that conversation with the planner after and was like, listen, I know that I didn't deliver the way that I could. Moving forward, I'm doing this, this, and this, and this, and this. I really appreciate you, giving me the opportunity, and I do hope we can work together in the future. But if you have any future questions, here's my VA, and she's
Yeah.
helping deal with these things. And I'm hoping that this level of attentiveness is going to help kind of keep elevating myself and my relationships and all the best. But for me, it's moved a lot of different things off of my plate in my business that I didn't even realize.
What really stuck out to me about what you said was that this was about a client a year ago. Like at
Yeah,
your caliber, I would just assume, oh, you're past this phase.
it
But
happens.
it happened. Yeah, no matter at what level you're at, this is gonna happen, and being able to take the feedback and adapt. And
Yeah, I
have you
mean, like
worked with the
it was
planner
amazing.
since?
Yeah, we
See,
have.
happy
Um,
ending.
so it's been good in that sense. So it takes time, and you have to just kind of. I felt really it was not what I wanted for that job, and so I realized that and was like, okay, what do I need to do to fix this?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I fixed it in a lot of different spots. So I think it's important overall as you're kind of coming up and you're establishing your business and even you've been in business for 10 plus years, like things still happen. Like,
Hmm.
we're all human.
Yeah.
And you don't have to realize like my business has evolved a lot over the years and is constantly evolving, partially because of the way that my clients have evolved, but also myself as a business owner has evolved. So I'm always like, well, I want to do this now. I want to change that. I want to try that out. I want to change things up. And so it's important to roll with those punches. I like to think.
Yeah. All right, I have some rapid fire questions for you. So we'll see. The first thing that comes to mind, the best weddings have.
Cake.
Yeah, yeah. The last book I read was
Ooh, I reread Middlesex.
ah,
Intense. Not
yeah.
like it's not like casual reading, but it's a really good book.
Two colors I will never mix in an outfit are.
Black and white.
Oh, okay.
I wear a lot of color. I do not own.
Yeah, yeah.
I have one black shirt, but it's polka dots.
Well, are the dots white? I hope not.
Yeah, they
Ah!
are actually.
Now you can't wear
I know.
it.
It is a pattern though, so I accept it, and that's
Yeah.
good.
The last show I binge watched was
We just binge watched She-Hulk actually we just binge watched, which was really
Ooh,
good.
yeah.
Fun. I liked it a lot.
Or I'll add in this question then. The streaming platform I couldn't live without is
Honestly, it varies depending on whatever
yeah.
shows are on.
Yeah.
Netflix was our go-to for a long time, but I find that their caliber of shows is just not what it used to be. And there's just a lot of stuff now,
Mhm.
which is great for value for money, but it's just kind of watered down. I'm finding Apple TV Plus has really high caliber shows
Yeah,
and really
quality.
so I'm like, I really like that one. We're watching Shrinking right now, which is really
Oh, great. And then I'm going to pivot to another streaming related question. The shows loaded all at once or weekly?
I prefer them loaded all at once, but I actually enjoy watching them weekly so that
Yeah.
I'm not in a like vegetative state or losing the whole weekend.
Yes, yes. I prefer the weekly release too.
I
My
think it's nice to kind of like, especially on the
build up.
streaming side, you
Yeah.
get a chance to be like, ooh, I can think about that. Like we're watching Mandalorian, because why not?
Hmm.
I mean, the US Disney, and
Yes, yes.
you will definitely be in that. So I was like, that I love it that it's weekly because I get time to be like, what happened? What's gonna happen next?
And
And when you
not being
stick with,
off the internet
yeah,
until you finish it,
yeah,
like
I know.
my design inspiration is
Art Nouveau,
mm, and the place I hope to travel to next is
Croatia. On the
oh,
other.
very nice. Very nice. So, Jordan, this was so fun. Where can our audience find you and how can they work with you?
Yeah, it's a couple different spots. Our website, a good day inc.com. You can check us out on social media. Same thing, a good day inc. On Instagram mostly. You can see me stalking people on TikTok. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't post, but I really enjoy TikTok. Not yet, anyway. And that's kind of where you can find me there. I do a lot of speaking, obviously our services from a stationery branding and gifting side, but we also work with brands on their, websites and strategy and all those kind of fun things. So
Any speaking engagements coming up that we can follow you along with?
yeah, I'll be at the Signature CEO in April. I'll be at Wedding MBA in November.
Ah,
Um,
great.
so we just found out we're going to be there, so I'm really excited.
Oh, good.
Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you. I don't know what else yet on the speaking side, but we'll kind of see. It's just at B Sage. I'll probably be there again next year, which is awesome. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's a lot of fun. I love conferences, and just in
Mhm.
general, I love learning and I love getting to meet people. Especially, so I'm up in Canada, so it's hard for me to like get a lot of FaceTime with people, and so those are really great excuses for me to sit with
Yeah.
for a few days.
Well, maybe when you're, at the conferences, you can start posting on TikTok doing your outfits of the day. Let
Should
us
I
see
should?
what patterns you're rocking.
Yes, yes.
Or you'll have options and they have to find you at the conference to
Ooh,
see
yes.
which one,
I
like
love it. I love it. Thanks, Nina.
Yeah, yeah. All right, guys. Thank you, Jordan, and I hope to get to chat with you again soon.
Thank you so much.